The average German worker puts in about 1,340 hours a year. The average American puts in roughly 1,800. That is a difference of about 470 hours. Call it 11 extra working weeks every single year. And Germany is still Europe's largest economy, and still one of the 3 most productive countries on earth measured by output per hour. So either the Germans have found something the rest of us haven't, or they are simply better at leaving. It turns out to be both, and almost none of it is about working harder. It is about 12 specific habits, some cultural, several written into federal law, that make long hours structurally unnecessary. Not discouraged, unnecessary. Number 7 is the one holding all the others up, and number 11 is the one nobody outside Germany ever thinks to count. One thing to get straight before we start, because it usually gets said wrong. Germans do not outproduce Americans hour for hour. On the current numbers, they do not quite. What Germany does is reach roughly comparable output per hour while working the fewest hours of any country the OECD measures. Fewest. Not fewer than average, fewest. That is the trick worth studying. Not superhuman output, the systematic removal of the hours that were never producing anything in the first place. 12 habits, starting with a word you cannot translate. 1. Feierabend. The day has an ending, and it has a name. Start with the word, because the word is the whole thing. Feierabend. It translates badly, literally something like celebration evening, and it means the moment work stops and your life restarts. It is not clocking out. It is a state you enter. When a German says Feierabend, they are not describing a time on a clock. They are declaring that the working part of the day is finished and will not be reopened. And here is what matters. It is said out loud, to colleagues, without apology. Nobody performs reluctance. Nobody says, just one more thing. The English language has no equivalent, and that is not a translation problem. It is a cultural one. We never needed a word for a thing we do not reliably do. 2. Das Arbeitszeitgesetz. The 8-hour day is not a guideline. In Germany, the length of your working day is not a matter between you and your manager. It is a matter of federal law. The Arbeitszeitgesetz sets the working day at 8 hours. It can be stretched to 10, but only if the average across 6 months comes back down to 8. So a heavy week is not free. It creates a debt that the calendar has to repay. And there is a second rule that does more work than people realize. 11 consecutive hours of rest between the end of one shift and the start of the next. 11. Which quietly makes the late-night email followed by the 8 a.m. meeting not a sign of dedication, but a compliance problem. Nobody has to be brave enough to go home. The law already went home for them. 3. Das Arbeitszeitkonto. Overtime becomes time, not vapor. Now the mechanism that makes the 8-hour day survive contact with reality. The Arbeitszeitkonto, the working time account. Think of it as a bank account denominated in hours. Stay late on Tuesday, and those hours are not absorbed into the general fog of being a good employee. They are recorded. They accumulate. And you withdraw them later as time off. This one structural detail changes the entire emotional physics of overtime. In a lot of countries, extra hours are a gift you give upward and never see again. In Germany, they are a balance, and balances get settled. Which produces something quietly remarkable. An employee who worked a hard month in March and takes the following Friday off, and nobody in the building treats this as a favor. It is just accounting. 4. Die Gleitzeit. Flexible edges, fixed middle. Gleitzeit. Flexi time. But the German implementation is more specific than the word suggests. There is a core period, typically something like 10 to 3, when you are expected to be reachable. Outside that core, the edges of your day are yours. Come in at 7, leave at 4. Come in at 9:30, leave at 6:30. The company does not much care, because the company is measuring the account, not the doorway. What this kills is the single most wasteful ritual in office work: being present in order to be seen being present. The performance of availability. Sitting there at 6:15, not doing very much, waiting for someone more senior to leave first. When the edges are flexible and the hours are banked, there is nothing to perform. There is only the work and whether it is done. 5. Der Urlaub. Holiday is a block, and it is actually taken. The legal minimum holiday in Germany is 20 days on a 5-day week. That is the floor. In practice, most employees have somewhere between 25 and 30 days because collective agreements pushed it there decades ago. But the number is the less interesting half. The interesting half is that it gets used, and used in blocks. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, consecutively. A German colleague announcing a 3-week absence in July is not making a bold request. They are describing the summer. Compare this to the country where people accumulate holiday like a dragon hoards gold, take 4 disconnected long weekends, and let the rest expire. The block matters more than the total because a real holiday has a shape. You need days simply to stop vibrating. 4 days off is a pause. 3 weeks off is a different nervous system. 6. Die Krankschreibung. Sick means absent, not working from bed. You wake up ill. You see a doctor who issues a Krankschreibung, a certificate that says, in effect, this person is not available. And then the crucial part. You are not available. Not available on Slack. Not just monitoring email. Not available. Your employer continues paying your full salary for up to 6 weeks. After that, the health insurer takes over at a reduced rate. So the financial pressure to drag yourself in and infect the 4th floor is largely engineered out of the system, which produces the outcome the rest of us keep failing to reach by asking people nicely. Sick people stay home. They recover in days rather than weeks. They do not turn one illness into 11. It turns out presenteeism was never a character trait. It was an incentive structure. 7. Der Betriebsrat. The Works Council has actual teeth. Most countries have some notion of employee representation, and in most countries it is decorative. Germany's version is not. The Betriebsrat, the Works Council, is elected by the workforce, and under the Works Constitution Act, it holds genuine co-determination rights over exactly the things that determine your quality of life. The start and end of the working day. Break arrangements, whether overtime happens at all. Read that again. Overtime is not purely a management decision. It is a decision management has to agree with the Works Council. This is the load-bearing wall behind everything else in this video. Feierabend is a lovely word, but words do not survive a determined executive with a quarterly target. A legal body that can decline the overtime does. The culture is downstream of the structure. 8. Die Besprechung. Meetings have an agenda and an end. German meeting culture is not friendlier than yours. It is shorter. The meeting starts at the stated time, not 2 minutes after while people find seats, but at it. There is an agenda circulated beforehand, and the agenda is treated as a boundary rather than a suggestion. When the last item closes, the meeting closes. There is no drift into adjacent topics, no warm 10-minute preamble, no 20-minute overrun absorbed by everyone's evening. It can feel abrupt if you are used to being socially cushioned, but look at what it protects. A meeting that reliably ends at 3 is a meeting you can plan a life around. A meeting that might end at 3 or might end at 4 quietly consumes the whole afternoon whether or not it runs long. Uncertainty costs more hours than overrun does. 9. Die Directheit. Directness is a time-saving device. Germans have a reputation for bluntness, and visitors usually file it under rudeness. It is worth filing somewhere else. It is a scheduling decision. In a lot of workplace cultures, a bad idea is met with, "Interesting, let's take that offline." which means no, but costs 3 more emails and a follow-up meeting to arrive at no. In Germany, you are more likely to simply hear that the idea will not work and why in the room once. The disagreement is about the proposal, not about you, and this distinction is held far more firmly than outsiders expect. Someone can dismantle your plan at 11 and eat lunch with you at 12 entirely without tension, because nothing personal was ever in play. Diplomatic softening is not free. Somebody pays for it in hours. 10. Die Trennung, the wall between work and private life. Germans draw an unusually hard line between the professional and the private, and they draw it in both directions. Work does not follow you home, but equally, your personality is not expected to come to the office. There is no obligation to be a family here, no compulsory fun, no pressure to disclose your weekend in detail. Some find this cold. It is also enormously restful. Volkswagen became the famous example when it stopped routing email to some staff phones outside working hours. Though it is worth being accurate, that covered particular employees, not managers, and not the whole company. And crucially, there is no German law banning after-hours contact. What exists is the 11-hour rest rule, plus a culture where messaging a colleague at 9 in the evening reads as a small failure of planning on your part. Not a badge of commitment, a mild embarrassment. 11. Die Ausbildung. The person doing the job was trained to do it. This one is invisible from outside, and it might be the most important on the list. Germany's dual training system puts a very large share of young people through a structured apprenticeship, years of combined classroom study and paid work inside a real company, before they take up a trade or a technical role. Now follow that through to the working day, when the electrician, the machinist, the technician, and the administrator have all been formally trained for the specific job they hold. An enormous category of overtime simply never occurs. The overtime that comes from work being done wrong the first time. The overtime that comes from someone learning on the job, live, at everyone else's expense. A great deal of what we experience as being busy is actually rework. Competence is a time-saving technology, and Germany capitalized it up front. 12. Die Sonntagsruhe. Sunday is quiet by law. And the last one is the one visitors find genuinely disorienting. On Sunday, Germany closes. Most shops are shut. Not all. Stations, airports, bakeries, and pharmacies carry on, and there are a handful of permitted open Sundays a year, but the default is closed. Sunday rest is protected all the way up at constitutional level, and it comes with rules on noise that your neighbors will enforce with real enthusiasm. No drilling, no mowing. In many buildings, no washing machine. The first reaction is that this is inconvenient, and it is. The second reaction is the interesting one, because the thing that makes rest hard is not usually a lack of permission. It is that everyone else is still going. If the shops are open, the errands exist. If the errands exist, the day fills. Germany's answer was to stop the whole society at once. You cannot be productive on Sunday, so you are not. So step back and look at what the 12 have in common, because it is not what people expect. Almost none of them ask an individual to be disciplined. Feierabend is not willpower. The 8-hour day is not willpower. It is a statute. The Works Council is not willpower. It is an elected body with legal authority. Sunday is not willpower. It is a closed shop door. Germany did not solve overwork by asking people to be better at boundaries. It built the boundaries into the law, the contract, the calendar, and the street, and then let ordinary people be exactly as weak-willed as everybody else, which is, I think, the actual lesson. If your rest depends on your character, you will lose. If it depends on a rule, you will not. If you want more of how Germany quietly solved things the rest of us are still arguing about, subscribe. That is what this channel is for. And whatever time you finish today,